It's Tuesday, so welcome back, or welcome for the first time to Heart and Mind. I'm Dr. Dina McMillan, and I don't care who you are, you need to watch this show. I try my best on this show to always bring up issues that all of us face, or most of us face, or a significant number of us face. All of us are facing this one. We're talking today about nimble navigation in a divided world. So welcome. And if you are watching this later, please try to join us live on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I promise, we have information you will not hear anyone else. It's not hyperbole, it's just the truth. No more boring Tuesdays. You can actually watch something that is going to give you information and tools you can later use in your life. You can use them right away. It's easy, accessible, effective. Take advantage of me spending way too many years in college. So we're on at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. on the Pacific Coast. Now, some of you may be joining me like my friend Melinda, who joins me from Australia. She's in Queensland in Australia, where it is 10 a.m. on Wednesday. And I also have people calling me and contacting me saying, hey, we watch in New Zealand or we watch in the UK. Welcome, everyone, including my UK people with insomnia, where I think it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, you know this if you watch the show. Social psychology, that is what I do. And if you are watching later, go back and really think about this, because you're used to hearing from clinical psychologists who talk about psychoses and neuroses, etc. Now, I studied that as well, but social psychology is very specific. It looks at how we learn, how the brain works, how we learn, how we're influenced, persuaded, manipulated, coerced, indoctrinated, brainwashed. And of course, we focus not only on what happens organically, we look at how you can use certain tactics to increase your influence. Now, I admit I use one of those tactics on my show. That's why you see imagery. That's why I take the time to put the slides together with pictures on them. Because what the brain does, studies have found we have a picture superiority effect, which means we are more likely to remember information, not if we see it written down, but if we see a relevant image with the information, we're more likely to remember it. And I don't do this show to hear myself talk. I do it to offer some real help to the world. Now, speaking of real help to the world, I want you to think about and pick up your phone while you're watching or right afterwards and get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. When I mentioned something that impacted all of us, COVID response impacted all of us. Don't you really want to know what was going on behind that curtain? Naomi Wolf and her team spent years figuring out what was in those Pfizer papers that Pfizer went to court to get permission to hide for 75 years. Now, they weren't granted that permission, but it's so extensive, it would take you a lot of time to go through this and to interpret what was there. They've done it for you. So go on Amazon, get your own copy of the Pfizer papers, and by buying a copy, you also support the historic work of Daily Clout, bringing key information to the public. Now, speaking of key information to the public, you can also, while you're on Amazon, look up my books. Look up Dr. Dina McMillan, and I have a few books there, including this one, Brief Overview of Abusers' Strategies and Tactics. This is a short guide. It's less than 60 pages. A short guide with graphics that shows you the selection process with abusers, and it shows you the definitions of the tactics. So I list the tactics, define them for you. You can use it as an easy breezy reference every time you come across someone. And by the way, this type of manipulation, it's kind of designed for romantic relations, but guess what? Knowing this gives you a superpower, and you can use this information for these tactics, which were also used in family groups, friendship groups, workplaces, by the government. People who actually listen to my podcast, my Unmasking the Abuser podcast, for instance, were very wary when the COVID measures came out, because they had spent time with me learning the tactics of manipulation, and they recognized them, as did I. So we had a very different reaction when the measures came out and the mandates came out. So do yourself a favor, get a copy of this. And if you know any single people, this is a gift, male or female. This is a gift to give to a single person so that they don't get caught up in an abusive relationship. Now, today's topic, please contact me. So if you sign in on X, if you're on my X page, if you're on Naomi Wolf's X page, or if you're on Daily Clout, Rumble, you can sign in and make comments and ask questions live on the air. Or you can contact us later. If you go on Daily Clout or Rumble, we will have the recorded episodes, and you can put a question or a comment there, and I will actually see it. But this is how I get topics for future shows. This came up a couple of times this week. And then yesterday, I was on a professional social media site that I'm sure a lot of us belong to. And someone I know well, a fellow Black woman, made a comment about white women approaching her and admitting to her that they voted for what she called, she didn't call him by name, the felon, she called him. And she said, she responded to them, well, I don't carry holy water around in my purse to be able to sprinkle on you. But I think it's good that I got to know who these people really are. Now, I felt that was very inappropriate on a professional site to automatically assume something bad about somebody because they voted differently than you do, and to feel justified in saying it like that. And I made a comment back and said, if we referred to Biden as that, criminal with severe dementia, it would automatically make us in opposition, would make us enemies. We're dealing with this a lot. Now, today's show, you'll notice the language is a little different because I want to be able to use this with people who see me as the opposition. I don't see them that way. I just think we differ in a few values. But I normally have been using the term woke, which was embraced and brought in by the progressive left. But some of them have decided they now find it off-putting. So for today, I refer to them as left progressive, which is a little bit harder to get on my slides. But today we're talking about something that keeps coming up. How to nimbly navigate this divided world. How do we handle this? Now, I know this woman well, which is why I responded. Normally, I don't say anything. If they don't ask me, I don't say it. So many of us have gotten so used to having to deal with people who not only have different values, but who perceive us as the enemy and have no compunctions about taking over the space that we share, expecting us to submit, concede, and shrink in that space. So we're going to talk about how do you handle that, where you don't have to do that, but you still value the relationships. I often mention I have a left progressive friend whom I love dearly. And some of the things that we're talking about today, I use with her and she uses with me. This, in a practical way, it actually works. So get ready, get your coffee, get your tea. Well, actually, you probably should, unless you're in the UK, you probably shouldn't have coffee or tea at this time. Maybe Melinda and the people in Australia and New Zealand can have coffee and tea. The rest of you get your cocoa and let's get ready. Have you seen the latest fluoride headlines about the impact of fluoride in the water supply? The future of oral care isn't fluoride, it's peptides. And the wellness company just launched the first ever peptide paste that regenerates gum tissues, strengthens enamel, and naturally whitens your teeth. It's called Smile, a doctor formulated breakthrough that works with your body's natural repair process. This advanced formula blends targeted peptides with blue spirulina, aloe vera, and powerful remineralizers to boost blood flow, stimulate collagen, and help rebuild lost gum tissue, all while gently whitening without sensitivity. No fluoride, no peroxide, no artificial dyes, just real clean ingredients that fight bad bacteria and support a healthier mouth from the inside out. Ready to upgrade your oral health? Experience the future of oral care with Smile and get 10% off plus free shipping. Head to dailycloudhealth.com and use the code DailyCloud. Take action today for a healthier tomorrow. Now, two of the people that came, that one wrote me a comment, one actually was a conversation, we're discussing what, if you'll remember, back before the holidays, episode 15, your holiday survival kit, we talked about how to handle difficult relatives over the holidays without totally losing your cool or ruining the holiday for everyone else. Okay. But that was kind of short term. I basically said, okay, if you're going to see these people for a discrete period of time, this is what you do. I gave a clear exit strategy. Actually, we had more than one. And I recognized it was seasonal or occasional. These are people that you don't necessarily see every week, every month. Some of these people you only see during the big holidays. I thought, we need to go further than that. And of course, I was justified in my thinking because, again, this issue came up yesterday where I saw somebody say something that was so divisive. Now, the person who said it is also somebody that I love. How do you handle that? And how do we handle it where up to now, most of the time, we just back down? We are not helping ourselves or the world we live in, our culture, our kids, if we keep backing down. But how do you keep from making it into an aggressive argument? I ended the comment that I made saying, just being civil to each other is part of the way that as professionals, we have to work with people whose values we don't share. And just being civil can help. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about situations that you get into where you have more frequent contact. What you say or do could impact your livelihood. And exit strategy is more complex. It's not as simple as just gathering your toys and going home. I also always want to put a situation where we can minimize the friction. So the strategies we're going to talk about today are about minimizing friction in workplaces, friendship groups, social settings, and parent groups. And again, I do not just want people who consider themselves right-wing to find the show comfortable. I want people of all political persuasions to be able to watch this show and get valuable information from it so that we can interact productively, harmoniously, work together, live together, listen to each other, and get through. So if you have any questions, sign in and ask, but this is going to get very interesting. Hey everyone, it's almost summer, and you've heard me rave about how much this product has helped me. What about you? Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and type 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. It's found in your cartilage, bones, hair, nails, and gut. Types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything. Coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, including me, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipes, or ingredients. And you'll speak to a real person ready to help. Join their private Facebook community to share success stories, recipes, and to support each other on this journey called life. Visit getnativepath.com/dailyclout and start your transformation today. That is getnativepath.com/DAILYCLOUT. Now, today, we're going to talk, and I'm going to offer you some key factors so you aren't caught unaware. If you've watched this show before, I think not just the social psychology, I think one of the biggest differences between what I suggest as far as how to live your life is that I advise people not to go into situations unaware. To not only have situational awareness while you're there, so you're looking around, you're paying attention, but if you foresee issues arising, you pre-plan to figure out what you will do if this happens, what you will do if that happens. Anticipate any likely pitfalls and consider your boundaries. A lot of us have gotten very used over the last 20 years, if we are not left progressive in our thinking, we've gotten very used to conceding the space to the left progressives because they tend to be quite assertive. Is that still okay? When do you stop and say, no, I'm not going along with this? We're going to talk about that. And if the other person gets angry, how do you de-escalate the conflict? Not always possible, but we're going to try to talk about what's the way to do it. Now, a lot of this is the suggestions are drawn from my Healing the Rift program. Healing the Rift program is a program I developed in order to be able to teach people how to get along well and build a team and have a cohesive workforce with people who may vary significantly in their lifestyles, in their values, in their views. It's an anti-bias initiative, so it helps people self-reflect on where they're biased, and I give them tools on how to reduce those. We're going to talk about, do you speak up or not? And I'm going to invite my friend Melinda to join me from Queensland because she's one of the people I talk to about a lot of this stuff. So welcome, Melinda.
Hi, I've got my camera and I'm here looking at you today. Fantastic. How are you?
I'm very good. This could get heated. So I want to hear from some of the people who always comment. But if you're new, go ahead and make a comment. We will read it out. I will answer it. This is what we have to ask ourselves when somebody says something, or a policy is initiated, or they make a comment like I read on that social media post, which is a professional post, where they refer to the president as a felon, assuming that most of the people reading it are going to just accept that they're going to agree with that. Do we speak up or not? Now, I want to say to you, because this is somebody I care about, if they had made the comment on X, if they'd made the comment on Facebook, I wouldn't have said anything. Because those are more about your views and opinions. But on a professional site, in a professional space, it was completely inappropriate. And I think it has been harmful. One of the things I blame all of us for, I think we backed up and backed down too easily. Now, if you do speak up, I want you to be prepared. And Melinda, look at the list. See if you can think of something else. You could face some fierce opposition. It could impact your relationship or your job. You could lose big from speaking up and saying, I don't agree to this. This is not my values. I want to tell you something. And I'm willing to go on record. When I was working for the government in Queensland, Melinda's state, and they hired me for my expertise in gambling harm, which is another thing, my ethical strategic solutions company. I do education programs. I designed an education program on gambling harm for the public. Now, initially, when they asked me to do it, they gave me a sizable budget to hire an organization, put everything together, the graphics, the communication, all that. But management kept asking me questions. And because I'm American, I'm treated a little differently than if I were actually Australian. They asked me questions I don't think they would ask me if I'd been Australian, about politics. And when they found out politically, I am not what they expected. They see Black woman with braids. They thought they knew me. When they found out they didn't, they pulled my funding. So I was still contracted to do this project with no money to do it. I was the only person treated that way. I actually talked to a legal team in Australia. They said you would have a legal case of discrimination if you wanted to push it. So I'm not saying this lightly. By admitting what I really think and believe, when asked, when poked, I didn't bring it up. I don't bring it up because I don't want to alienate people who might think differently. If it's not relevant to what we're doing, why bring it up? But they would not let it go. So they kept asking me. And when they found out, they treated me terribly. I was treated very badly.
And, Dina, when you talk about this, I just wanted to pick up on something here that I think it's really important when we're discussing this topic, that we all understand that when you're talking about personality types of the left progressives and what we would normally call the wokies or the woke people, we have talked in previous shows about certain personality typing and cluster B type personalities. And I think one thing about these personality types is because they can be bullies, because they talk over the top of people, because a lot of them are narcissists, they're very difficult to deal with. But in the public service particularly, they tend to rise to positions of power. And I think this is becoming and has become a bit of a problem for wanting to speak out about these things, is that you see these types of cluster B personalities in positions of influence and power, which I think that we all need to address, and we need to sit back and say that as part of speaking out, as part of this whole process, we need to create our own positions of power and make sure that that is not the norm anymore.
Well, I know this, that if first of all, had the position been reversed, I would not have asked them political questions. I would have asked probing questions about their ability to do the job that they were hired to do. And in fact, only time it would have come up is if they put anything political in the communication for the public information, because
But
I
that's
would
the
want
key
to
difference, isn't it? That's the key difference. The key difference in everything that we talk about with this division in our society at the moment is this idea that there is one side that is that can be relatively reasonable and can debate and will be professional and won't bring things up at the inappropriate times. And then you've just got this leftist progressive group who find that they give themselves excuses to be able to do anything at any time to anybody. And I think that's why the playing field always seems a little uneven to me.
Well, one of the reasons I bring it up too is that because I want people to be on the alert for, if you are more center or more right wing, I don't want you to just think, oh, the problem is that they're left wing. The problem is a certain way of handling your beliefs and values and treating other people, because if we see it on any other side, we need to call it out as well.
Absolutely.
I have had so many meetings and by the way, in case you don't know this, Australia, the US, New Zealand, not quite as much, Canada, not quite as much, but Australia and the US and even the UK culturally have far more in common than they have that is dissimilar, especially Australia and the US. I would say of the countries, the English-speaking countries, Australia in many ways has more in common with the US than they have with New Zealand.
Yeah.
New Zealand is more like Canada.
Yeah.
So I've spent a lot of time in all of them, but that's why I can work twixt in between, because I've lived in 3 out of the 5. Okay. 2 of the countries I've mentioned that I've lived in 5 countries. 2 of the countries were non-English speaking. I've lived in France and Germany as well. But the similar cultural norms, including laws against discrimination that seem to never be applied to the left progressives, only to conservatives. So we have to stop being passive. Now, one thing I want Australians to do, one of the reasons I have Melinda here, I want Australians to dig deep and bring out their inner Trumpism, because they have been sliding towards Canada for a long while, and I'm terrified it's going to get worse. Now, understand something. People with strong beliefs tend to be more assertive. And I'm going to bring up in a second something that became very apparent to me this week as I've been, doing my research, walking around, and I'm listening to something that I listened to a few years ago. Please be aware of something else. When you awaken, it's a process, not an event. I had listened to the same material 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and noticed it's a little biased. Now, it just glaringly obvious, because I'm so focused on finding bias and not being influenced by it. But what has happened is we have allowed for 20 years for the left progressives to pretend to be moral and to pretend to be righteous, to say being weak, enabling pathological behavior patterns, lifting up people who are criminal or wrong, not standing up for traditional values, which have been found to be the healthiest way for a society to thrive. We have been responsible for giving in too much. And because with all the things we just mentioned, people with strong beliefs, including on our side, tend to be more assertive. We can be assertive without being bullies. What happens is a lot of them go into bullying. Now, here's a couple of slides just with some trouble spots that tell me if you think you've run into these as well. The opposition is in the majority, real or perceived. This is one of the reasons that I have worried about the media putting out all of these left progressive values. It has made the left progressive cause seem more popular than it actually is, which is why so many of them were stunned when Donald Trump not only won the electoral college, he won the popular vote in the election in the United States, in spite of cheating, where you had in Arizona, they found the Democrats had listed 10,000 people with a single address. Okay, that Kamala Harris only won states that would not allow people to ask for ID. Not an accident, but in spite of that, he said, let's make it too big to rig, and that's exactly what happened. And the Department of Government Efficiency has shown that these people made themselves seem bigger than they were. Now, you may be working in an organization or industry. I work in domestic violence, community service, gambling harm, diversity training, HR. All of these have left progressives in charge and have had for the last 20-something years. And the left progressives, because they're not both used to seeing themselves represented everywhere, and they have the personality issues, and we've been too passive. So let's take responsibility for our own crimes. We've been too passive. A lot of them just aren't used to hearing anybody say no. They get shocked. I'm sure this person that I responded and said that language is divisive. What if somebody had done it on the other side? He would not start a conversation. I know from teaching people, when I do my Healing the Rift training, I work hard to make it as non-divisive as possible, because as soon as people put their defenses up, they stop learning. And when we're talking about bias and what bias does, I want everybody to feel safe enough, comfortable enough to be able to dig down deep and see where they hold bias, positive or negative. And they won't do that if I start out by making them feel stupid or bad because they have a certain set of beliefs. And a lot of organizations need to learn this, but I am at a real disadvantage in my industry because I am outnumbered, just like when I was working for the Queensland government. Yes, I am putting that on the record. Just like when I was working for Queensland government, I'm outnumbered. And the people that are against me were in a position of authority over me, which put me at a disadvantage. Here's another set of trouble spots. Your group is silenced. All of you are saying, oh, yes, I know. Everybody's thinking of places where you just feel like you can't speak up. Here's what Melinda mentioned and what we talked about. Go back and look at the episodes where I talked about why are people woke, because we talk about this in depth. You're dealing with a lot. The left progressive cause has designed their ideology to appeal to people with cluster B personality disorders. So we're talking narcissism, histrionic, which is the need for constant attention, making yourself the center of attention all the time. And histrionic comes with a tendency to be sexually promiscuous as well. Borderline personality, very, very manipulative. So it's like narcissism plus manipulation, you get borderline. Both bipolar, which used to be called manic depressive. Okay, so it's up and down and up and down. Antisocial personality disorder, where you have a level of anger at the world that you just walk around just on a knife edge. Sometimes you're also dealing with psychopaths, people with psychopathic traits and sociopathic traits, where they actually get a joy out of hurting other people, especially people they think are in opposition to them. Now, if you are in an organization that you think is biased against white people, I know this is probably a strange thing to hear from me, but I designed a whole program for my Healing the Rift, and it includes a training program, a module called Why You're Not a Racist. So I looked at the tactics being used to make white people feel guilty so they can be manipulated. And I actually showed you not only what's being done, but how you can fight against it. It's part of my ethical strategic solutions. Ethical strategic solutions Our motto is finding the answers others miss. So contact me on X at Dr. Dina 1, or just email me, drdinablog@gmail.com. And the one that's a broader range, I have another program called, in the Healing the Rift program, called Bias Isn't Bigotry. So we talk about what bias is and what it isn't. So when people call you names, you have evidence, receipts that you can pull out to say and show them, no, bias is a normal part of human behavior. I am not a bigot. I may be biased because of this, and it gives you tools to reduce your bias. Shows you what it costs you and reduce your tools. Now, some points to consider with all of this. Again, holding up that mirror and looking at all of us who consider ourselves left progressive. Welcome back, Melinda. I know you're at work because it's the work day in Australia. Some points to consider. Silence is assumed consent. So when we have been quiet because we saw somebody that was getting so worked up, and they get those eyes, those frantic eyes, and you're like, it is not worth it to have a whole big argument here. Or the person's your boss and you're like, well, I don't want to get fired. Silence, when you are silent, it's submission, and it is assumed that you consent to whatever's going on. Silence isn't violence. That terminology is a left progressive manipulation trick, but it is assumed consent. Some things are worth defending, including our children. And if you want to defend our children, realize something. They model their values and their behaviors off what adults do. So when I hear people say, well, I don't care what adults do, but when it touches the kids, everything adults do, it touches kids. So if it's wrong for your kids, ask yourself if it's right for adults. And most of the time, unless you're talking about sexual behavior that is appropriate by age and relationship, most of the time the answer is no. If it's wrong for kids, it's wrong for adults too. You just can't see it because you've been conditioned, like all of us, to think that what adults do stays contained and doesn't impact other people, but that's just not true. And understanding tactics helps. So again, this show, and go back to the previous shows where I've talked about the tactics being used to manipulate people. Because again, I could say, hey, I've been trained to do this. I actually put effort in to unplug from the matrix. But look at the fact that I am related to so many people that are fully plugged in. Look at the fact that I'm working with people that are so plugged in. Look at the fact that I have friends and parent groups so plugged in. So I can't say it doesn't impact me just because I'm not directly affected. So we have to decide from both sides. What if friends, workmates, social group, fellow parents hold conflicting beliefs? And I am attempting to be fair. So you'll see here, one is a bunch of left progressive women holding a sign that says ban white men. And the other is some right-wing Trump supporters saying, let's go Brandon, which is a joke based on some people at an event screaming out in unison, F Joe Biden. And the journalist, the newscaster that was there, said to the person that she was speaking with, who was named Brandon, oh, look, she knew what they were saying, but she didn't want to repeat it. Oh, look, they're saying, let's go Brandon. And people just picked that up, laughed, and said, we know what we mean when we say, let's go, Brandon. So today, again, is not about bias. These suggestions are relevant if you're conservative or left progressive. Now, also, if you are left progressive, do me a favor, contact me on any of the many sources I've put here and tell me if you're offended by the word woke. Because I had somebody say that it's derogatory. I had other people say I refer to myself that way. Let me know. I'm just trying not to offend anybody, but I have to get my point across. And I have to be honest, woke is so much easier to use on a slide. Left progressive has too many letters. Okay, who's more likely to have an issue? Us. If you are central or more conservative, we've been putting up with this for more than 20 years. I was putting up with this in graduate school because I was expected to stick to the narrative, even in my dissertation topic. And when I didn't, I've mentioned before, I had to replace one of my dissertation committee members because she didn't like my topic of researching the long-term effects of being on welfare, because she wanted me to stick to the script. But why am I mentioning the left progressives? Because with the recent triumph by Trump, a lot of us have come out of the dark, blinking in the light, because we haven't seen the light for a long time. But a lot of people who are used to just quietly, passively putting up with something because we didn't think we could do much about it are now standing up and saying no. So a lot of left progressives are working with people who are openly in opposition to their values. I want you to be able to work with them too. This isn't just for one side. But here we go. Over the last 20-something years, left progressives have dominated many workplaces, including anything that is primarily female. Because in the previous episodes, we mentioned how women are far more susceptible to the tactics of indoctrination used by the left progressive movement. So if you actually counted them up, most left progressives, really strong left progressives, are female. So if you have a female-oriented workplace, or a lot of other situations, not just female, a lot of workplaces, they've dominated. Friendship groups, because they've been taught for 20-something years that they are in the moral right. Most people who are left progressive have no compunctions about stating their views as if they're an absolute truth. So they've started to dominate getting their viewpoints across. And the people who don't agree feel like they just have to be quiet or they'll be vilified. Parent groups. We're seeing this in schools. Oh my goodness. Parent groups, schools, social environments. When I said friendship groups, that includes when you go out socially. And left progressive imagery is everywhere. In Australia, I know that they still use June as Pride. Trump canceled it in the US. So officially, there's no more Pride Month. He wants it to be Veterans Appreciation Month or something. But we still see, and it comes with a whole slew of things. It's not just about romantic or sexual relationships. It's about a whole slew of things. And the imagery is everywhere. Again, forcing people and vilifying people, even fining them, arresting them for not agreeing with these values, saying that this is absolute truth with capital T, you have to go along or you get in trouble. Now, what I've been listening to again, this is a really good book. It actually got me my TED Talk reading this book, and I thought the book was really good, so I did what I always do and got an audio version. But listening to it again has been fascinating, because the examples of the people that he uses in the book, Carmine Gallo, so many of them have been outed as being not necessarily positive role models. We have people who are on the Epstein client list. We've got people who've been caught out by Bobby Kennedy Jr. as putting all sorts of medical malpractice into the system. He goes in great detail, emotional detail, about an attorney who has an agency and how he got all this funding from his TED Talk because he made it really emotional. And his whole agency supports defendants who come from low income areas. So what they were doing, I'm listening to it and thinking, so what he's doing is getting people emotionally caught up in these defendants and completely ignoring their victims. So he's getting people to open their wallets and feel like a good person for defending somebody who 8 times out of 10 is an ace predator. But of course, he doesn't say it like that. And I said to myself, and he's talking about, oh, use emotion to get people going. And we do need to use some of these tactics to motivate people, but we have to be careful. I'd like to motivate people. I don't want to manipulate people. And I think especially cluster B people make decisions and choices through their emotions. So they are highly susceptible to emotional appeals and primal appeals, which is like appealing to your fear or your sex drive. That being said, he does give some great tips on public speaking. So anybody that has to speak in public, Talk Like Ted is actually a good book. Just kind of ignore all the left progressive stuff that's in there. And I thought this was one of the biggest revelations over the last 6 months. The Department of Government Efficiency found the U.S. aid agency had been funding left progressive causes around the world with American tax dollars. And I know some of that money went to Australia too. Australia, Canada, Europe, South America. They have been funding leaders, journalists, media sources to present left progressive values as the ideal, as the most just. I'm sure they paid somebody to come up with that slogan, diversity is our strength, which is absolute nonsense. Diversity's never been a strength. Diversity adds hard work, and it only works effectively. It only adds value if there are shared fundamental values. And we forgot to ask for that part, so of course we didn't get it. Anybody who doesn't share left progressive values over the last years has been harshly punished. I have lost so many contracts. It is really sad. It's one of the reasons I want my audience who think more like I do to actually hire me, because even though I keep the politics out of my work, some people will not hire me because I am not left-wing. And that is really unfortunate. And yet many of us have persisted. Now, we're going to quickly just go through workplace. Again, if we don't get through everything, don't worry about it. We can finish it up next week. We did that with the why are people woke, and it ended up being like 4 episodes. This is, I think, the most important one. So speak up, Melinda, if you've seen this. If you face situations like I did, if it was not a short-term contract that I was not intending to stay, I would have taken this advice. If you have opposition to some of the policies, the promotions that are being put together and advocated in your workspace, and it goes against your values, don't make a big kerfuffle at a meeting. Go to HR and tell them your concerns. Don't put anybody on the spot, especially in public. But also don't back down if it's important to you. If their policies strongly conflict with your values, you decide whether or not to go along. Over these last years, I've had to go along with so much stuff that I thought was wrong. Or even just thought that the way they were doing it was wrong. That there's a huge difference between accepting something and promoting it. And even if you're going to accept it, you really need to know the impact. And we're just not allowed to look. So how do you get along with people who are very different? This is another thing that annoyed the people that I was working with at Queensland government. They expected, because some of the people were very left-wing, that we wouldn't get along. But I've told you before, unlike many people, the first person I use anything I learn it, I use it on myself. So I was very appreciative, genuinely appreciative of my colleagues when they would help me, when they did something well. It was not a strain. They were hardworking, smart people who just happened to think differently than I did in some ways. Didn't touch on our work. So I was very appreciative. So we got along really well, which bugged them even more because they wanted to be able to point at me and say, look how she doesn't get along with anybody because she's too right wing. Focus on shared goals. Use humor whenever possible. Now, the humor thing, I mentioned it a little bit later about the kind of humor. I have gone to so many meetings where they started off with a joke about how horrible Trump is or how stupid his followers are. That's not the humor I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the fact that, like, oh my God, I'm so sleepy. My kid, it keeps waking me up. And everybody starts laughing. Okay. Anybody with children starts laughing. I mean, something like that, something shared. Don't initiate contentious views. Again, I never would have brought up who I voted for. It was not relevant to my work. I did not bring it up. Don't get caught up in arguments. When people start putting down what you believe or whatever, just say, look, we're not going to agree, and walk away. But also don't lie. One of the problems, cluster Bs take you backing down as victory for themselves. I've had to say to some of my cluster B people I know, people backing down doesn't mean you won. It doesn't mean you changed their minds. They just saw that look in your eye and didn't want to get in a big argument. And don't bully anybody, but also don't allow yourself to be bullied. And in your workplace, if the issues are core and their position is firm, get a new job. Now, Melinda, speak up on any of this. Now we're going into friends. Oh, golly. Again.
Just before we get into the friendship, I think the workplace one is really, really, really important, Dina, because of the fact that we do spend so much time with people that we work with, and the relationships that we have at work are often just as important as the relationships we have with our family members. And I think that there are probably some things where you have to get some even ground and come to a position of understanding on both sides. And I find asking questions the best way to do it. Just asking questions when someone wants to bring something up, rather than being really contentious, ask them questions so they can, if they want to talk about it, they can actually put the foundation around their argument. They can actually put it in the sand and say, this is why I feel this way. If they can't, then you can have that debate. But I think the workplace, there is a time and a place, and it is very different from being with your friends and family, but it's often just as important, because so many people spend time, a lot of time with each other through the day,
Well, I also look at it this way too. We've gotten so used to being in a workplace where, again, the left-wing values have dominated. And the way the left progressives have trained their followers to perceive any area of disagreement as hatred. So you see a lot of young people, oh, you hate me, you want me to die. No, I just don't agree with you on this. So one of the challenges I
think in the workplace, it's the extreme language that's very tricky and very, very hard to manage, because a lot of people will walk away that they might do that in the workplace, whereas they may not do it in another situation, simply because of this key word, professionalism. Professionalism and understanding. But I still believe that, you still have to start standing up for core values, even in the workplace. We do have to start moving into that realm and start to impact the culture of companies to make them a lot more balanced. Now, companies are finding out the hard way at the moment that they're going woke strategically in their marketing and their communications out to their customers, and that's not working for them. And I think that there's these examples that can be grabbed a hold of by people in these organizations and in other organizations as examples to say, we do need to talk, we do need to move away from these kinds of discussions and into something more balanced and something with really good core values. And if you can't match the core values, the culture is not for you.
Well, I also think, one of the things that was a challenge working with the job I was just mentioning is that it was a government job. And it
Yeah.
was so biased towards left progressive. And I didn't feel that was valid. There was no concession made from people for people who may disagree. It was
Mm.
forced on you. And it was like, we celebrate these groups. And it's like, no, not everybody here celebrates that.
And that's exactly right. I think this is our culture and this is what we stand for as an organization. That is absolutely critical too, because it is often stuck on walls. It is often repeated by CEOs and director generals. And half the time, the way that it is now, and I haven't been in the corporate workforce for many, many, many years, but I know I was there when it all started to come in about 15, 16 years ago now. And it was very, very uncomfortable. And I wasn't awake enough and mature enough, or I didn't have enough understanding as to what was happening. And more fool me, because in the end, the sort of behaviors then that were being fostered in these organizations were absolutely toxic. Absolutely toxic. And a lot of us were sort of getting left behind, and we actually didn't even know what to do about it because we didn't understand that was the start of it. That was the start of this kind of this false moral high ground that was forcing values and behaviors onto people that were actually not good at all, and they certainly weren't moral in many cases. So it is really important, even though it's the workforce and you want to be professional, it's still really important to try professionally to hold your ground and to at least have some impact on the culture around you.
Well, that's why I said, don't make a scene. Try to go to management, try to go to HR and say, look, I don't share these values.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a big deal out of it. But I feel that as, everything, I will be so glad when President Trump gets rid of taxes, because the amount of money I've spent on taxes for the last 20 years is horrendous.
Oh my goodness, you should be here in Australia. Oh my God, tax in Australia, that's just, we're getting taxed for.
As a taxpayer, though, working for a government agency that doesn't represent me at all in there, and telling me I have to not just accept certain values, I have to accept them and celebrate them in my workplace, I felt it was completely inappropriate. I worked so hard to keep my programs, my Unmasking the Abuser program, my Healing the Rift program, my Gambling Harm for the Community program, really politically neutral. They weren't even trying. They were so used to feeling that they were on the side of the angels. And yeah, the angels, but the angels are kind of like from a hot place, not a cold one. And I just got so tired of that. Now, let's quickly, we're probably going to run over time a little bit, but I don't care. They can always edit it out. The areas you share with friends. This is how I'm able to stay friends with my friend in Washington State. She's such a lovely person, and she does so many wonderful things for the community. That's what we talk about. We talk about what we share, the positive experiences. We don't focus on where we differ. We don't talk about politics. I don't talk about how she votes and why she voted that way, and she doesn't ask me that either. But I want, again, all of you listening to this, because even though in the recording, I'm going to try to help use this information among people of all political views. Initially, most of my audience is pretty right wing. We've been going along to get along for a long time. And I found an article on parade.com, 11 phrases to use instead of pretending to agree with someone. So there's a way of saying something where you're like, but again, if you're dealing with somebody who's cluster B, psychopath, sociopath, it may not work, but you can at least try. And don't be afraid to change the subject. If they're talking about stuff, going on and whipping themselves into a frenzy about something that is the opposite of your view, whatever that is, change the subject. Get back onto neutral ground. Now, if the differences are too glaring, and I know, Melinda, that you've had to deal with this because we talked about it. If the differences are too glaring as far as values and beliefs, start limiting the amount of time and the number of situations you spend with that person.
Yeah. It's
You don't
sad.
want to have to brace yourself every time you spend time with someone. And
Life
if they're,
is really, really too short to be spending
yes,
it with people who are going to niggle at you every minute of the day. You need to be around people that challenge you. And I'm not saying that agree with everything you say, but there's a way to have beautiful people in your life that you may not agree with everything about what you talk about, but there's a way to actually debate and have really deep intellectual conversations. If you can find those people, they're absolute gems.
well, that's why if they constantly challenge you in an aggressive way, in a way where they expect you to listen to them, but they don't listen to you, you
Yeah.
may have to not just limit time, you may have to reposition them. And if you look at episode 11, I discuss my circles of intimacy. I provide the questions
Yes.
that you need to ask. So basically, it's just a measure where you go through and ask yourself specific questions and figure out how close emotionally am I to this person. And you put them in a circle. And then you do another list of questions looking at how the person treats you, not what they say, and you figure out where that person positions you. What priority level are you? And then you see whether or not the two match up. If you differ significantly in values and you have somebody who's in a really close circle, it's going to cause you a lot of pain. You may have to move them to a further circle. It doesn't mean you don't love them. Doesn't mean you don't spend time with them. You just limit the time, limit the situations, and lower your expectations. Okay. And also with friends, be on the lookout for flying monkeys. Flying monkeys is one of the honorable mention tactics I use in my Unmasking the Abuser program. It's based on The Wizard of Oz, where instead of attacking Dorothy and the Tin Man and Scarecrow and Cowardly Lion directly, the witch sent out her flying monkeys to attack them instead. So it stands for whispering behind somebody's back, starting bad rumors, doing all sorts of things in a very sneaky way to turn people against that friend. So sometimes if you have very different values, you may be working hard to stay neutral and friendly and not make your friends choose and etc. But that other person may not be doing the same thing. So be on the lookout for it. Now, quickly going through social settings. As I said, we're going to run a little over, but that's such as life. Humor is useful, but not mocking and othering. Okay, stick to shared subjects, stick to things nobody would consider bullying, stick to things that don't make people uncomfortable. If you can do that, then being able to laugh at things together is a very bonding exercise. It even gets your brains to start firing in sync. It even syncs up your brain. So if you can find a way to laugh together, it's fantastic. In social settings, reserve your opinions unless asked directly. So don't just offer. And I have to tell you some of the things, sometimes it still doesn't work. I may have mentioned before that I was asked to come down to a talk that was given at a university in Sydney. And I went to the talk, and the lead guy there was an American who I found kind of creepy because he was making jokes and mocking conservatives for not wanting sexual content to go to elementary school kids, which let me know my predator hackles were rising. And then later when we were having a meal, he came to sat next to me and started talking about how wonderful the vaccine was. And I did my usual where I just don't respond. He wasn't having that. And then he finally just asked me, you are vaccinated, right? And I said, no. He said, why? I said, because it's not tested. I'm just too wary. He stood up and made a whole scene, threw down his napkin, said, I'm not going to sit next to an anti-vaxxer, and then stormed off to the other side of the room. And the person who had invited me, I had considered a friend. We talked at least 2 or 3 times a month, virtually had conversations 2 or 3 times a month. He just stopped talking to me completely. He completely ghosted me after that. So he held me responsible for this person having a tizzy fit when he kept pushing about me being vaccinated. This is what I mean, though, about sometimes if you stand your ground, even subtly, softly, you still may run into trouble. Try to get back on neutral ground. I thought this picture was funny. These guys are hilarious, but try to see if you can find something in the middle where you all agree in a social settings. They just try to stay away from the contentious topics because it affects people's digestion, and keep in mind that you're not going to change anybody's mind at a party. So don't even try. Find something, again, like with the workplace, find something to genuinely like or appreciate about the people or the setting or the whatever. Try to keep the positivity flowing. Now, here's another thing, parent groups. This is really short because I only have a few things, but I thought you'd want to pipe in here. Get involved in what they're teaching your kids.
Absolutely.
You know what? Oh, no.
That could not be a more important statement in this show, in a lot of other things that we talk about. That is really, really critical because the future generations, the children coming through, are going to be carrying through core values and traditional values, and they're going to be taking forward to their children, to their children's children, and to be able to break this toxic division in society. We must be able to approach the institutions that are impacting children and be able to understand and be able to push back against extreme woke narratives and extreme left progressive narratives that you talked about earlier. It is just so critical, Dina. We're too disengaged with what's going on in the classrooms.
Well, I'm going to pull a Charlie Kirk here, because he was asking somebody about DEI. Somebody said, oh, DEI is actually positive. He said, okay, name a company that's actually improved by having DEI policy. I would say this, name a generation that has actually been improved by left progressive values being in the schools. We
Absolutely.
have a situation now where half of the children are diagnosed as having some type of personality disorder or mental illness because what they're being taught is so destructive.
It's so true. And I actually talk about that in my book as well, is that we're actually losing generations of young people because they are being indoctrinated and brainwashed to believe things that are just simply not true about themselves, about other people, about the planet. And it's causing massive mental health issues and a lot of depression. Suicides are going up. I mean, it's probably one of the greatest threats to our society at the moment is the way that our young people, our tweens and teenagers and young adults are coming out of schools and universities completely brainwashed.
Absolutely. And keep in mind this, Malcolm X said this back in the 60s, it's still true. Only a fool would let his enemy teach his children. So if the school you're in is putting those pornographic books in the library, they're teaching, celebrate this, they're taking them to mosques, they're doing everything that is against your core values, figure out something else. You could even get a group of parents together and homeschool, hire somebody to do homeschool for a group of kids. It doesn't have to be you, but get those kids away from that because teachers have enormous authority over kids. And for all of you, one of the reasons I talk about my books, one of the reasons I talk about getting the training through my business, Ethical Strategic Solutions, is because I give you evidence. Everything I do is well researched. You need evidence to support your views. Daily Clout has so many people talking about various topics, and they all bring receipts. Okay, we all bring receipts. You can just spend a little bit of time and you will have, so when somebody says, well, so-and-so said this, well, no, actually, oh, Trump is a racist. And I'm like, well, he won an award, the Ellis Island Award. At the same time, they were giving it to Rosa Parks because of his equality policies in New York and anti-discrimination policies. So
Yeah, that's exactly
no,
right.
he's not. And they never referred to him as a racist until he ran for president, and they wanted to turn the Black community against him.
Yeah.
What he doesn't support, he doesn't see us as inferior or weak. So he doesn't feel like he has to coddle us. And he does not believe in the soft bigotry of low expectations. He's like, you want it, rise up and get it. That's exactly what the civil rights movement fought for. So all of you, thank you. I know we ran over time, but thank you for being here. Thank you, Melinda. Any contact me on X at Dr. Dina 1. Email me, drdinablog@gmail.com. Let's talk about how you can hire me to come in and do training at your organization. So when they say, well, I don't believe that, you don't have to rely just on you. I can actually come and tell them myself, and I have lots of credentials. So I will see you next Tuesday, as promised. No more boring Tuesdays. So I hopefully will see you next week. Thank you for joining me.
Bye.